Okay. I'd like to call to order the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education. It's Tuesday, November 5th, 2024, and we're meeting in a blended format with some of us in person today at Casco Bay High School and others joining via Zoom. I'd like to first invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag
to the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Portland Public Schools recognizes the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand, the Wolastoqiyik, or Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki Confederacy, or People of the Dawn Land. We are honored to have Wabanaki children among our students today, and as a district, we are committed to making the past, present, and future of Wabanaki peoples visible in our schools and classrooms. We are starting today with, I just got bumped out of board docs, so bear with me for a second, with a roll call. Thank you. All right.
All right.
Dr. Warren, would you like to go ahead and call the roll?
Yes.
I'm very out of practice with
You're
this.
doing great. Okay. Member Ali.
Here.
Member Bilyeu. Absent. Vice Chair Bondo.
Présente.
Member Bryden.
Here.
Member Figdor.
Here.
Member Grant. Absent. Member Knorr. Member Opperman. Here. Student Representative Hayden.
Here.
Student Representative Katiba. Student Representative Knight. Student Representative McDonald.
Here.
Student Representative Rosado. Student Representative Kunku. Chair Lentz.
Sarah, can you just note that Board Member Knorr is here? I don't think she just got off of mute fast enough.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
Excellent. So thank you so much. Tonight we're going to start with public comment. Is there anyone who would like to address the board? So this is on issues that we are not voting on tonight. And I don't see anyone in the room. If we have one participant on Zoom with us, member of the public, if you would like to comment, please use your Zoom hand. Okay, I don't see any public comment on Zoom or in the room, so we're going to close public comment. And we're going to hold the board chair remarks until Chair Lentz is able to join us and move right into the report of the student. And tonight we are hearing from our student representative from Deering High School, Anya Hayden. Anya, please take it away.
Thank you, Representative Figdor. And thank you to everyone who is here, participating or watching on this incredibly intense and eventful day. For anyone who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, I am Anya Hayden, a senior at Deering High School and the student representative on the Portland Public Schools Board. Before I begin speaking generally about recent happenings at Deering, I wanted to address the weight that today carries for my classmates, teachers, and I. Today, Deering and other nearby high schools went into a full lockdown at around 12:30. The lockdown lasted about an hour. It halted classes and startled students into facing the danger that political extremism can pose. Deering students feel that this election will directly impact their lives in unparalleled ways. They express deep concern about gun control, and today's events serve as a reminder that our concerns go beyond what conversations or a strategic plan can address. This is by no means a reprimand to the board. It's simply a reminder that the entire Portland Public Schools community is addled by existential concern. On top of this, Deering students lead independent and mature lives with many responsibilities like holding jobs, taking college classes, and helping with their family's finances. They've said that issues of healthcare access, foreign aid, the status of asylum seekers, and the housing crisis feel the most consequential to them today. In quick summary, Deering wrapped up our first quarter of this school year last Friday. Many seniors have been working rigorously on their college application preparations with the help of our Make It Happen program. And semester-long classes moved into their second halves, some elevating their intensity as we approach a few long weekends and breaks. In addition to the academic engagements of Deering students, community building efforts are being carried out across the school in various clubs and activities. Finally, the Deering community is deeply engaged with civics and government from a global level all the way down to a state and local level. I'll begin on the academic front. With the help of Deering's new librarian, Miss Genry, and student volunteers from National Honor Society, Deering is launching a new peer tutoring program where students can drop into the library during our study hall learning center block at the end of the day to get help from peers who excel in particular subjects. This initiative demonstrates the application of Deering's motto, learning together, popularized by our wonderful Miss Knorr. As far as community building and school culture go, this fall, every active Deering sports team made it to the playoffs or championships of their sport, and the Deering football team had their best record in 20 years. This is a testament to the dedication of Deering's athletes and the skill of our coaches in supporting extracurricular staff. Winter sports like basketball and swimming, go Ram Dogs, will be starting their practices in the next few weeks. Deering's Black Student Union hosted their first open gym evening at Deering a couple of weeks ago. The event was open to students from Deering, along with students from neighboring high schools like Portland and Waynfleet. This is a way of connecting students of color from across the city and giving them a welcoming space to develop connections and build community. The arts at Deering are another outlet for students to enrich themselves and develop our school culture. This fall, the Drama Club will be putting on a production of the Addams Family musical, and the cast members have been hard at work building sets, designing costumes, and rehearsing. Student members are also working on writing grants to help fund productions and to maintain their performance space. An exciting last note about the district's art department. On Thursday, October 10th, the Portland Public High School's orchestra was welcomed to Merrill Auditorium by the Portland Symphony to sit in on their dress rehearsal for their concert with Yo-Yo Ma. As a violinist with the high school orchestra, I wanted to share that following his rehearsal, Yo-Yo Ma came over to speak with us, even though we were all told that this was a privilege reserved for the donors of the symphony. When asked if he got nervous performing, he said that he has learned to temper his nerves by reminding himself that we're all just here to enjoy life and creativity, and that although he may have thousands of audience members watching him, we're really all just here, I quote, to have a party. Then he gave us all high fives, which left us shaking in awe. And I now walk into every audition or rehearsal repeating in my head that it's party time. We're all just here to enjoy. To conclude, I want to talk about how Deering is preparing students to face a changing world and a time of political unrest. As I said before, Deering students are getting involved. It is remarkable for us to reflect that students in this district are involved at all possible levels of government, local, state, national, and international. At the international level, ambassadors from France, the Central African Republic, and Gabonese Republic visited Deering a couple weeks ago to speak with the Francophone students and anyone interested in learning about their roles as representatives. This visit was facilitated by Mr. Alexis Kanamagire, Deering's French teacher, and the advisor of the French Club, who's been crucial in bringing together and empowering French-speaking students. At a national level of engagement, Deering students in the National Honor Society organized a voter registration drive and helped peers of voting age or those over 16 years old to register to vote, and to understand the importance of participating in democracy. On this coming Friday, the high school orchestra will get to celebrate a diverse group of people from all over the world as they take their official oaths to become American citizens. We will have the great honor and privilege of playing welcoming music at the citizenship ceremony and to witness the culmination of a long journey for these new Americans. The Club Youth in Government, created 2 years ago at Deering, is a state-level example of our students' civic involvement. The club culminates with a 3-day conference in Augusta where students conduct mock legislative sessions. The cohort of 12 Deering students attending this year will be leading committee meetings, participating in floor debates in the House and Senate over bills they have helped to draft, and argue in front of a mock Supreme Court. The conference is to be held this weekend, and Deering's delegation includes many people elected to positions, including Senate Committee Chair, House Committee Chair, and Attorney General. Election Day is about duty, the responsibility of citizens to step outside of their routines and consider issues that affect us all. This was apparent to Deering students as we entered school, curving around the line to vote that had formed by our gym. Election Day is also about hope. The hope that our collective efforts, schooling, and ultimately our choices will improve the lives of everyone and make the world a better place. My hope is that whatever the outcome of today is, Portland Public Schools continue to uplift academic progress, cultural diversity, community, and encourage participation in our ongoing project of making this union more perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hayden, and thank you so much for starting, really anchoring your excellent update in the weight of what happened today, the impacts of political extremism on our daily lives, as well as how we're all moving through the world right now with so much uncertainty. I see the chair is here, so I'm going to pass it over to her, and just want to thank you again, Anya, for really excellent comments.
Yeah, thank you so much, Board Member Figdor, for jumping in like that. Really appreciate it. And also Student Representative Hayden, I just think your words are what a lot of us needed to hear. So thank you for putting the time into that. I just wanted to start my remarks with a thank you to law enforcement, staff, and those around the city today that helped to manage the hoaxes that we saw within our schools today that put several of our schools on lockdown, several of our polling places, and just continue to be incredibly grateful for the ways that our staff continue to rise up to more and more challenges that we see in our world. So just thank you all, and to the superintendent as well for helping manage that and get some great communications out to the community. I did want to just remind people that the polls are still open in Portland. So if you're listening to this and haven't voted, please watch the recording and go to your local polls. They're open until 8. And if you have an absentee ballot, you have to get that in by 8 o'clock at the City Hall ballot box. So please, if you haven't done that, please do, so that we can continue to invest in the hope that Student Rep Hayden mentioned. And in a different but related note, I just wanted to remind folks that there are just a lot of opportunities coming up to be in conversation with the board and members of our leadership team across the district. So actually tomorrow night at East End School from 4 to 5:30, we have a community conversation where you can come and just talk to board members about what's important and what's on your mind. November 20th, we have a virtual session. December 5th, King Middle School, and December 11th at Lincoln Middle School. And all of those times and dates are on the district website if you need more information. There's also an additional opportunity to come hear updates about the strategic plan and high school for our future tomorrow night at 6:30 to 7:30. So you could technically go to East End and then tune in online for those updates. You can have a whole night of district news. And I just wanted to let the community know many members of the board have actually been out in our high schools sitting down with students to hear what is important about them. So we've met with members of many of the affinity groups and student leadership groups across the district, and it has been an absolute honor to get to sit down with students and hear them transparently talk about the challenges and the things that they're really proud of. And I think one thing that has come across loud and clear is that Portland public students are very proud to be in our high schools, and they are proud of their high school, and they're proud of the district, and that has just been coming across so emphatically. It's been wonderful to hear. But they've also really talked about important issues like transportation challenges, scheduling challenges, and have really pointed out that there's unequal access to activities and academics, and that's concerning to them. And so it's just been really helpful to hear that. And I think all the board members that have been there are holding on to those thoughts tightly as we move into the budget season. And so just grateful and thankful for all of their opinions and thoughts, and we're going to continue that tour throughout the fall. And finally, the city has started their district meetings, which is all the city staff go and they hold meetings across the city, and you get to hear updates about sidewalks and streetlights and all kinds of things, housing. And the superintendent and I are planning to be at most of those meetings. Other board members will join as they are able, but it's a great chance to learn more about the city and how that connects to what's happening in the district. So we just hope to see all of you at one of these opportunities over the next couple of months. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. I would echo what the chair said. If you haven't voted, go vote. The only thing I would disagree on is if you do go vote, don't feel a need to necessarily turn in and watch the recording of this. We'll give you a night off. It's completely fine. Just to give you guys in the community the facts on the hoaxes, the swatting that we dealt with today, just so everybody has the same information. Police reported, and the DOE, the Department of Education, shared with us earlier today that there were hoax calls, what they call swatting, where there are fake calls that go into schools. They were specifically targeting schools. They were not targeting polling places, but they were specifically targeting schools today, where individuals were making fake calls. They appear to all be from the same individual, as police know it right now, and they would alert the school to a potential dangerous or unsafe incident. Police and the DOE let us know that this was happening, and so we were aware, and we were in contact with the police department actually before our first call came in, even to our own schools, just making sure that we were prepared if something came up, in partnership with them. But even if we knew that it was a potential that it was part of a hoax or part of this, it was still important in partnership with Portland Police and following their lead that we treated it with the safety and the care that it could be real. And so that is why today, when we received the first call at Portland High School was put into a lockdown and was secure, and police did go through the building. And then when the second call came in at Deering High School was put into a lockdown. There were differences in the calls, and so police responded to them slightly differently in terms of the significance. And then because of the proximity of schools to Deering High School, it put limited access for visitors, what we call in our terms a lockout, at Longfellow and at Lincoln. When those things happen, obviously it puts a fair amount of stress on students. And so we encourage folks to access and reach out to our guidance counselors and social workers if there's a need. For our staff, just a huge thank you, because it also puts stress on them in terms of managing that and also just experiencing that. And so just a thank you there. And thank you to everybody in the community and the families who it can be stressful to hear that your son, daughter, child is going through that experience. And so working with us and alongside us in just making sure that we maintained safe environments. And so when that happens, because the school staff is usually pretty busy managing the situation at the school level, we do send out that communication centrally so that we make sure that communication gets out in as timely a manner as possible. Our hope is that we do not experience this anymore, but the reality in today's environment is that we unfortunately probably will. We experienced this as well last year. And when we do, we will continue to treat it seriously to make sure that we keep people safe. And we will do similar to what you saw today in terms of responding to it in partnership with our police department and communicating with you as soon as we can. And so the one thing I would just ask is that when you do get that communication, oftentimes our school lines become overwhelmed with phone calls. And so we just ask that you wait on that until we're able to get a second communication out with an update on that. I'm going to pull up our update for superintendent comments now. Just give me 1 second. And so I have 3 updates I'm going to do tonight. One is just 2 recognitions. The second is a quick update on partnership with the city and how we work on it. One example being the partnership with the police department, but just overall. And then an update as we get a little bit colder here, even though it was 70 plus degrees on Halloween, we are starting to prepare and plan for snow days. And so just wanted to update the community on that. So first, in recognition of National Principal Month, which was last month, the Maine Principals Association recognized a principal each day in October. And our very own Principal Beverly Stevens was recognized on October 24th as their Principal of the Day. Principal Stevens has been with us in Portland Public Schools since 2011. And so just very, very excited that the Maine Principals Association recognized what we all recognize and what families at Ocean Avenue recognize, which is the amazing work that she does every day with that school community. And so just wanted to recognize her tonight as part of the great work she does and as an overall symbol for the work that our principals do. And so just congratulations to Beverly for that recognition from the Maine Principals Association. Second, 2 of our recently renovated buildings have now earned the LEED Silver certification. I'm not going to read to you all of the details of what goes into getting LEED certified, but it is a recognition that both Presumpscot and Longfellow have done work in their renovation to make sure that they are meeting both energy and environmental design components that make them more friendly for our environment. And so this is a pretty prestigious and recognized sort of certification. And so just a credit not just to the work now, but to the planning that went into this to make sure that when these renovations happened, that this was a result. We do anticipate that Reiki, which was a third of these buildings, will also get it. There's just a little bit of work that they're finishing up, and then we anticipate that they will also be LEED Silver certified. So congratulations to that work that continues to pay dividends. This year, we're working in partnership with our city officials to better define and improve our partnership with the city. That includes defining and developing an MOU with the city that will include what are the key services, responsibilities, and cost sharing between the district and the city. It's being built through monthly meetings between the superintendent and city manager, as well as between the finance teams at the district and the city level. And so our hope is that more clearly defining that will result in not just better services between the departments, but also just clarity and better responsiveness for our families. Just a quick example of that successful partnership. If you were to drive by Longfellow now, you would see a slightly elevated fence that is ensuring better safety for our students when they are at recess to make sure that there is less access to Stevens Avenue. This came about when concern was raised by school staff and the PTO. But the challenge here is that the playground is something that's maintained by the school, by the city. And so this is something where we needed to make sure we were coordinated and responding together. And so through work that was also partially led by our very own board member, Opperman, we were able to get that partnership sort of mobilized, and we now have an increased height in the fence. And so that's a small example, but one where we really think that defining this partnership will result in better clarity and better services. So just wanted to highlight that as a big piece of work that's happening this year to define that. And then last, we're continuing our snow day policy from last year. The first 3 days will be traditional snow days, and then we'll transition to virtual instruction. So let me give you a little bit of background on that so you can know what we did last year and then what this will mean for going forward. Last year, we had 2 snow days, 2 late starts, and 1 early dismissal. The 2 snow days, and this will matter a little bit for context in a minute, were on March 25th and April 4th. And if you're curious, the late starts were in January. In school year 24-25, so this year, if there are no inclement weather days, so optimistic thinking here, the last day for students would be June 13th, and the last day for staff, for teachers, would be June 16th. The first 3 inclement weather days will be traditional snow days. That means that there'd be no school and no food provided. Student days would be made up on June 16th, 17th, and 18th, and the teacher last day would be 1 non-holiday day later. There's 2 things I just want to highlight in that last bullet for you. The first is that the original calendar that we put out actually had that 3rd makeup day as April 18th. We got additional feedback recently from staff and from school leaders that April 18th, the day before our spring break, was a particularly hard day to have as a makeup day. And so in response to that, we're taking their feedback and changing it to June 18th. The second piece is to highlight that it's one day after the last non-holiday. So if we have 3 makeup days, and the last day for students is June 18th, the last day for staff will be June 20th, because Juneteenth, June 19th, is a school-based holiday, and so we would not have school that day. On the 4th, and so now going to the next piece, so if we go beyond 3 snow days, on the 4th and subsequent snow days, school will shift to virtual instruction. Kindergarten through 5th grade would complete independent work. 6th through 12th grade would have synchronous virtual instruction. Food will be provided at 9 locations that we'll go and review in a second here. What you can see there is the 9 locations. There's 1 additional location from last year. So we added Rowe to make sure that families that are living in Sagamore Village could have a location that's easily within walking distance. And so that was the 9th that was added this year. Otherwise, these are the common locations that have been used in years past for food service on inclement weather. I will just note that we're exploring, we're not sure if this is going to be possible, but with our outside partners, about if we were to have a bigger storm or that type of thing, just how we could also provide food service outside of this for families that are less food secure. But in terms of our own food service, these are the 9 locations where families would have access. And families would have access to any of these schools. They do not need to go to their home school. So you can go to any of these on a snow day. For technology, for grades 6 through 12, all of our students have school-issued devices. Materials would be posted on Google Classroom. And we have a partnership with T-Mobile to provide hotspots for any family who may need support accessing the internet on those days. The staff expectations, which are provided in a little bit more detail on the attached document on board docs, is that on traditional snow days, teachers would not be expected to work. School year hourly staff may choose to use either a non-paid day or use a vacation time. Year-round school-based staff would be working, and they will work with their manager to determine if they would work from home or come in. And our custodial staff would report as usual per standard practice for inclement weather. And so that is a quick update on our snow day plan for this year. Chair, those are my comments for the evening. If it would suit you, I'd like to have Dr. Atkinson-Duena come up and do the elementary school update and then take questions for the overall superintendent.
Yeah, that works for me.
Good evening, everyone. Give me a second. So I just have 4 items on the agenda for tonight. I have a few recognitions. I'd like to also do a curriculum highlight on our field work. I have also a short video from our communications team to unveil tonight on the field work. So I hope you enjoy that. And then I also want to kind of talk a little bit about our recent work in October around our step back cycle and give you a little bit of an update on chronic absenteeism. And then I have an invitation to elementary school visits to board members. So some recognitions we had for the Actum panel, Courtney Graffius, who is our district technology integrator, Rosie Lenehan, who's the Rowe Library, and Meg Rooks, who is the Talbot librarian, and then also Court Kayward for more, facilitated a panel there this past month, and we're excited that they were able able to kind of showcase their expertise. Their title, I think, was something like "Not Your Mother's Library," and it focused on how our librarians have become kind of central to our technology integration work across the district. So also want to highlight that Carlos Gomez was on Maine Public Radio with Ari Schneider discussing the increase in multilingual students. So folks reached out to him for his expertise. And then Joanna Frankel and Chris Reiger were invited to present at the upcoming Maine State PBIS conference. And so this month we unveiled a new addition to our elementary fieldwork at grade 4. This from October 3rd through the 8th. We had students visit Mackworth Island, which is, if you haven't been there, it's close enough to go, which is actually one of the reasons that we choose some of our sites, is that we want to be able to feature kind of local places where students can then bring their families to visit the field sites and kind of share with them what they've learned. And so here are a couple of pictures from that. I do want to highlight that the field work that we do is part of our integrated units that also focus on Wabanaki studies and life science. So the plan has been for each grade to have one of those experiences. The grade 3 and the kindergarten experiences have been the ones that have been around the longest. And so this 4th grade field work was the first time that we did that with all our 4th graders. And just, if you can hold on a little bit while I move to the video. Ooh, did I lose my... And this was a visit with Reiki School. Dr. Scallon and I also happened to be on this trip, and Grace's team, Fong and Tess, helped to develop this with Katie West. So this is the first time it's been shown, and so we get to take you on a little bit of the trip yourself. Let's see if I'm not sure if the volume is gonna... So we just got the final permissions from families on some of those the images there. So, but you will see it on the website. It is unlisted right now, but anyway, it was a delightful day, and I think hopefully sometime you may be able to go on one of those experiences with us. I'm gonna change now, back. Sure if it's okay, thanks for your patience. So digging into the work, I just wanted two things or one thing happened that was new to our cycle, to our work this past year. We started a step back cycle. I highlighted one of the leadership goals that we have been working on this year. And part of that goal has included consistently tracking data to adjust plans and reviewing data. So as part of the step back cycle, we had an opportunity for principals to review their data, to review both their academic data and their school culture data, work then with their instructional coach to plan a professional development session with teachers based on that data to make some instructional changes in the classroom around our curriculum implementation. And then we also had a session district-wide focused on using that data to create some action plans that we will attend to from this time in the fall to, again, a midpoint, like around January, we will come back to those plans and kind of see how we're doing with some of that data. So I give you a little bit of example of some goals that were set by schools as part of that process. So by the middle of the year, 15% or fewer students will be chronically absent in 5th grade. That is from a school that has been seeing some higher absenteeism in their 5th grade. So they want to kind of zoom in and target their interventions around that grade level. Also, another school choosing to have 40% of classrooms have students carrying the cognitive load of the learning. Through our district walkthrough process, that's one of the we use a tool that helps us kind of look at like how students are engaged in learning, and that references that goal. So wanting to have more of that, seeing students doing the work in the classroom. And then another school took on the goal of lessening the number of students in red on our M-class assessment by the middle of the year, with interventions by at least 5 students in each grade. So they're identifying those students that they'd like to move into out of that kind of lower performing range and focus on that. So those are some examples that we'll be kind of tracking between now and mid-year. And then I also wanted to just give you a little bit of an update on chronic absenteeism. You may remember that Haley and the data team have started sending schools weekly reports, which has been really helpful around where we stand with chronic absenteeism. So this data is from one of her reports, and it just kind of shows that we have 4 schools that we are focused on in this period, mostly Joanna Frankel and I with our school leaders at these 4 schools that are showing chronic absenteeism rates higher than 15%. I will like to point out that all of those schools have pre-K students, and that is one of the places where we see some higher chronic absenteeism rates. So one of our action steps is to kind of collaborate with the pre-K team on how we can work together around some of that messaging and kind of start those good habits early. We've also dug into some of the research on like what is it about early childhood that we see those chronic absenteeism rates kind of higher higher at pre-K or at kindergarten. And so 2 points, I would say. One is that there is this misconception that learning at that age doesn't really matter. And so I just want to remind people of like all the important things that pre-K and kindergarten, that our pre-K students and kindergartners do in terms of forming like those early literacy skills, about learning how to work together, learning how to share, learning how to, really kind of be a part of a community, and that is really important work, and that starting those habits early is really important. And then the other thing is just a little bit of a lack of awareness of how those attendances, those missed days add up. And so we feel like part of our job is to kind of help communicate with families around how important it is to have students there, even in those early years, and just to help them have more awareness. So as an example, one step that we have going in 2 of our schools is we have parent-teacher conferences coming out right now. So they usually review the report card as part of the step. For their conferences, we are asking them to highlight the number of days absent, just to bring parents' attention to those absences in that conversation with the teacher. So it's a small thing, but we're just trying to raise some awareness about that. And then finally, I did want to offer an invitation to actually come on school visits with me on November 20th between 8 and 12. So if any of you would like to join me at some of the elementary schools, please just send me an email or talk to me during the break. So thank you.
All right, are we ready for some questions? Beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing that video. I think even without sound, it was still capturing some pretty awesome stuff. So thank you for bringing that in to us. Let's go ahead and start with Board Member Figdor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. Thank you for these updates. I had a question for the superintendent. I'm really think it's great to see the MOU that we're working on with the city to define our services and responsibilities and cost sharing. And I'm wondering if that MOU is expected to be done prior to when we start to work on the FY26 budget.
Yeah, we expect to be sharing a draft with them in the next 2 weeks, I would say. And so, yeah, I do expect it. One of the things that we'll have a discussion with, and I don't know if it'll be possible this year, but is working with them to also define when they'll share with us the costs that we'll be incurring for departments where they do the work, but we have the cost.
Yeah. I really appreciate that clarity and moving. It seems like taking this initial step is really overdue. I think especially when, I don't see it day to day. I see it when we get into the budget in the most obvious way. And every year it's a very challenging dynamic. And so I'm glad we're finally approaching it with both developing that relationship, but also with clarity and having, when our roles and responsibilities are clear, then we're both able to operate more effectively. So really appreciate that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Figdor. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Duina, I was wondering, when the sample goals set by school, which is wonderful, all that kind of step back and thinking is fabulous. It's the way teachers learn and administrators learn so that the kids can learn. But I wanted to know if it would be possible to have a list of what the goals were, one, I imagine each, and then to see the results of that goal, not necessarily formally in a presentation, but having access to that would be really appreciated.
Yep. I think what one thought we had is that whenever I come back in January to report back on some of the goals Or I can, if you come on the visits on November 20th, I'd also be happy to share some of the information then too. So.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. I think it really is important that we know and people know that you really are working with data and that it's real.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Opperman. And I would just add on to that, I think as a board member, I'm interested in the challenges that we see and the things that aren't working just as much as the things that are working. I think that is part of like developing a practice of we're going to iterate. We're just going to keep iterating until we get better and stronger at some of these new practices that we're putting in place. So excited to see how that moves forward. Vice Chair Bondo, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate the Wabanaki studies, the way we having the kids really on the field to have the hands-on and discovering all those amazing things. So maybe next time we can have some update on our Africana studies, where we are on that time frame and the work that we're doing. Or we still, just want to know where we are on that area when we talk about the curriculum, and also on the step back cycle for absentees. I like the concept, so I just wonder how often the team is going to meet, or they're just going to meet when they're receiving the data to review, and how often the data are coming to the team so they can be able to have a time to make some adjustment if needed.
Yeah. So on your first question, I know I just met with Fiona Hopper today, for instance, and we talked about getting an update on the Black Studies curriculum. I don't know if we have that on the agenda at some point.
Yeah, so I also met with Fiona the other day, and we said that we would do an update where we could share both where we're at with Wabanaki studies as well as how her time and sort of the focus is shifting to Black history. And so we would do that with the board, and we're just looking for the right date. And so that will come probably in the next couple of months.
Okay. And then as far as, so we've arranged to have these kind of district-wide step back data kind of review cycles 3 times a year. Probably would end up being 4 if you count sometime in the summer. That is not the only time schools are reviewing data. So if you look at our M-class assessment, our literacy assessment at the elementary school, it is typically administered 3 times a year, but if a child is in an intervention to receive additional support, then you would administer some parts of that assessment more often. Even as often as like 2 or 3 weeks to just be able to assess growth. And that's one of the things that we appreciate about the particular assessment tool that we are using, is because it does allow for that. We do have a couple schools that are also doing through the Maine through year, right? You can do a fall assessment, you can do a mid-year assessment, and then everybody is required you must do the fall and the spring. So some of our schools are also doing that mid-year assessment on the Maine through year. We haven't kind of set a district requirement for that, but I would say many schools are picking that up as a mid-year kind of interim assessment too, so they would have that data then. And then, of course, we are also looking at our classroom assessments of the work on the curriculum, and that happens at a grade level team with our instructional coaches. So they're also looking at that data against the standardized assessments as well. And that probably happens on, like at least a monthly basis whenever they select some kind of particular assessments that they all really want to focus on, and then use the data from those classroom-based assessments to adjust their instruction going on. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions from the board on any of those updates? If folks can raise their Zoom hand, that'll help me know. All right. Well, thank you so much for all of that information. I think I'm going to go ahead and move us on to the report of the secretary. So we have the consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes for October 15th, 2024. Are there any corrections from the board to the meeting minutes of October 15th, 2024? Okay, I'm seeing no hands, so with no corrections, the meeting minutes are approved as distributed. And then up next, we're going to have our an update on 5.1, designing and implementing a data system. I'll turn that over to you, Superintendent Scallon.
Yeah, just before our Senior Director of Data joins us, you've gotten a lot of Haley in the last couple of months, which I'm really excited about, right? This is right where we want to be, which is really using data to make sure that we're making informed decisions and looking at where our students are at and intervening as early as possible. The truth is also, though, that we've been kind of blind when it comes to data for a really long time. And so we are in the process now of sort of doing the process now of integrating into a new system so that we are able to use data to make day-to-day and long-term decisions. And so we're excited to have Haley be able to share an update on the work that she and the team are doing to make sure that we are not just with a strong data platform, but also how we're acting in the interim to be able to provide you information as well as board members to stay informed in this work. And so happy to have Haley present.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to share my screen. I may need privileges to share my screen.
You're a host. Information.
Success. Okay. Great. Thank you for that introduction. So I'm really excited to share an update on our work on Initiative 5.1. So just to ground us in our strategic initiatives, 5.1 is focused on building the data infrastructure that is necessary to use data in our day-to-day work to drive decision-making. And so our focus this year is specifically on getting our data dashboard system stood up and functional. So for some context, we issued an RFP in the spring of 2024, soliciting proposals from data dashboard vendors. We reviewed 7 submitted proposals. All of these proposals were scored on an extensive rubric that took into consideration things such as the ease of access for users on the dashboard, whether or not the data system could integrate with all of our existing data systems, if we were able to incorporate priority data sources. So we had a lot of hopes and dreams for this system, and we did our best to select a vendor that could sort of best meet the varied needs of users across the district. And so the vendor we selected is PowerSchool's Analytics and Insights platform. We are not switching our student information system to PowerSchool. It's a layered dashboard that integrates with our Infinite Campus SIS. So when we think about sort of the benefits of moving toward a centralized data platform, some of the key benefits for our district include this consolidation that is happening. It is bringing together multiple data sources from across the district in a way that we've never been able to do before. And putting them in a centralized location. Through this process, one of the key benefits for our team is engaging in a really rigorous quality assurance process. So through the process of integrating with PowerSchool, our team is working closely with engineers at the PowerSchool on the PowerSchool team to sort of vet all of our data sources and make sure that things are entered consistently across schools. Where we have gaps in our data, we're able to address them. And so while it is a slow process of integrating, it has been tremendously beneficial for sort of quality assurance. On the back end, the data is improving, but it also is going to yield more user-friendly dashboards, again, in a way that we have not been able to previously provide. And so we're excited that the dashboards will make it easier to provide real-time information to users across the district to enable data-driven decision-making. And then lastly, the dashboard is really designed to provide self-service access. And so I think that that's going to enable a greater number of users to engage with data, whereas right now folks really depend on the data team to pull data for them. So for a high-level timeline here for our deployment, so right now we are in the data integration phase, and this is about setting up data connections, doing that data quality assurance. As we move into winter, we are working closely with PowerSchool's team to set up our data dashboards and QA those and make sure that they look right. There's always something, once you get the data in there, you'll realize there's some oddity or idiosyncrasy. And so we'll work closely with their team to make sure that those are rendering correctly. And then also simultaneously, starting in the winter, we will be engaging various user groups to get feedback on the dashboards. While there are a number of pre-built dashboards that come with the platform, we will have an opportunity to do some degree of customization of the dashboards, as well as think about what types of supports or training will be necessary as we roll this out to a broader audience. And then in summer 2025 is when we will officially launch the dashboard, which will include a series of trainings for school and district staff. So I want to talk a little bit more about what our process for user engagement and capacity building is going to look like. We know that having a data infrastructure system that has accurate, reliable, accessible data is a non-starter, and we're really excited that the PowerSchool platform seems to be able to provide that. But we know that putting data in front of people is not enough. And so this user engagement and capacity building work is going to be critical for ensuring uptake and use of the system. Again, to move toward more authentic engagement with data in decision making. And so the user engagement sessions that we'll be running starting in January are really going to focus on getting some initial reactions to the preloaded dashboards. We think as a data person, sometimes it's easy to make assumptions that the way something looks is going to be accessible to the average user. And so we want to make sure that we are setting the dashboards up in a way that are going to be accessible to a range of users. And we also want to get input from key stakeholders about how we can customize the dashboards. Certainly, this will be a longer process of continuing to develop this dashboard system. And so what gets rolled out in the summer will not be the final product, but I think we need to prioritize the pieces for customization in the short term. We will also be doing a soft launch of the dashboards in April with a small set of users. We believe these critical friends will be really important for us to ensure that we have broader buy-in to the rollout in the summer. And then, of course, when we do our district-wide deployment this summer, we are going to create a series of trainings and resources, some kind of hub of tools and guidance that folks can access to ensure that people know how to use the dashboard and can think strategically about how to integrate it into their day-to-day work. And then, of course, once we launch this, the work is not done. And so going into fall 2025 and beyond, our team is committed to providing ongoing support and guidance for school and district staff to use the dashboard. So I know that there's a lot of excitement about this dashboard, and so the folks at PowerSchool were kind enough to share with me some screenshots. So I did get a little sneak peek of the live dashboard. It's not quite ready for prime time, so we're stuck with screenshots for today. But I wanted to share these really just to give folks a flavor for some of the capabilities that this system has. I will say that these screenshots do not do the system justice. There's just so much in there. And so we're really excited to have a live database in a matter of months. But just to kind of preview for folks here, so within the dashboards, this screenshot, I apologize, the text is very small. But what this is intended really to show for you all is just the wide range of dashboards that are pre-built into the system, ranging from information on attendance to enrollments to behaviors. And so this sort of one-stop shop for all things data is a really exciting step for the district. Just to preview some of, and again, I know it's hard when it's a static image because this dashboard really is meant to be dynamic. So all of the things that you see on this dashboard, on this student attendance overview, all of those things are clickable, so you can actually click into them and get more information. But you'll see things like color coding and graphs that are auto-generated that are intended really to make decision-making fast and easy for the user. I know chronic absenteeism is a high priority for our schools and who are thinking hard about how best to address chronic absenteeism. And so there are dashboards you can sort of see across the top in the very small font. There's actually a number of different attendance-related dashboards that are built, but there will be specifically a chronic absenteeism dashboard that allows for breakdowns comparing, for example, students who are chronically absent to those who are at risk of chronic absenteeism. And all of those bars that you're seeing on the page, you can click into them and get more information. So it's really intended to drive investigation, that you get an initial trend that you can investigate on your own just with a few clicks of a button. Just another little snapshot here from the enrollment dashboards, again, allowing us to get that real-time information about how enrollments are changing over time. And our student profile, I know from talking to school leaders, this is something that folks are excited about in particular, which is being able to have an individual student's dashboard pull up information from across multiple sources so that you can have a holistic picture of an individual student's performance and more accurately understand their needs. Another piece just to highlight that is exciting is that we have specifically a risk analysis dashboard series that we will be building out. And within the risk analysis, it uses statistical modeling to do predictive analysis about which students are at higher risk for not graduating and actually flags them within the system. And again, trying to take some of the burden off of our staff to make it easy to identify students who are in need of support. So just in summary, our current status is, I'm pleased to share, we are on track with our integration efforts. We have established an active data connection between our student information system and PowerSchool. We have migrated literally thousands of data fields over to their system, and it's a direct sync, so it updates nightly. So we will maintain that active connection to allow us to access real-time data. Ongoing work includes continued work around data quality assurance checks, setting up our single sign-on so that it's easy and quick for staff to access, and working with the PowerSchool team to do the dashboard fitting, which is sort of the setup of all of the individual dashboards that will display. And then lastly, just as a quick coming soon, something to look forward to starting on November 15th, Friday, November 15th, the data team will be providing a data snapshot that will summarize sort of our current status with almost real time. It'll be about a 2-week lag in the data. So not quite like PowerSchool, but you'll get an update on chronic absenteeism, suspensions, and district enrollment. So while we wait for our data systems to be up and running, we are excited to be able to offer that monthly update. So folks know where our data stands in real-ish time. So this is just a preview of when all of those monthly updates will be coming. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Haley. Any questions from the board? You wanted to raise your Zoom hands. I'm happy to call on you. Yeah, Board Member Figdor, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Haley. I had just a quick question. I was wondering for those monthly snapshots, who they will go to.
Those will be included in the board updates from Superintendent Scallon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Yes, I think Member Hayden doesn't have Zoom and is going to need to ask a question.
Okay, perfect. Let's go. Student Representative Hayden, go ahead. And then we'll go
Thank
back
you so
to
much, Chair.
Board Member Opperman.
And thank you, Board Member Opperman. I'm just wondering, I noticed when you gave a preview of the PowerSchool dashboard, there was a subheading for student behavior. Behavior is, of course, observed like from a subjective stance. And I'm just wondering sort of what methods are used to translate students' observed behavior into data, and what is there that prevents these observed behaviors from being reduced or oversimplified in that translation process?
That is a very good question. There's a lot to unpack there. So when we refer to behavior data, in this particular context, it refers to behavior incidents that are logged by administrators or staff within the schools that may lead to behavior resolution of some kind. However, I know that behavior data, broadly speaking, is of high interest and one that the data team has actually committed to doing sort of a comprehensive review of the behavior data that's being imported into PowerSchool to really think hard about how we're reporting certain information. So that short answer is it's sort of what we are mandated to report to the state and to the federal government, but it is part of a broader conversation.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Great question. Board Member Opperman, did you have another question, or you were just amplifying a student rep? Okay, perfect. I had just one question. I really appreciate, I felt like this presentation really responded to some questions that we had the last time about how we're going to meet staff where they're at in terms of their data comfortability and technology confidence. So that is awesome. I'm glad to see that. And I did want to just ask a question, like if there are any plans for a feedback mechanism or, if staff have questions about how to use it after it's launched, like where will staff go to both give feedback and to get further support?
Yeah, so there are a few options on that front. So in terms of maintaining self-service resources, our team is planning to use the Staff Hub as a landing place for all things PowerSchool dashboard so that folks, if they want to look up how to do something, that will sort of maintain user manuals and how-to guides, archived training videos there. We do also expect to get a series of resources from PowerSchool directly. That said, I know that not everyone likes to learn in that way, and sometimes you can get really frustrated and if you're trying to sort of figure it out on your own. And so I think the other hope for our team is to work directly with the network teams to determine what types of trainings and supports sort of in person or virtual trainings, whatever is easier for folks, are going to ensure uptake. So that might be attending PD sessions at individual schools. That might be, running trainings for district leaders who then can go out and train folks. So I think we're just exploring different options at this point, and I think the user engagement sessions this winter are going to be really helpful for our team to scope out what does it mean to best support folks in using this resource. And I suspect it will be quite iterative with time.
Beautiful. And then just one other question, which is fleeting. It will come back to me in just a moment, but does anybody else have a question in the meantime? Could someone think of one so that I can get my question back? No, I'm just kidding. Thank you. Good job, Brain. In the past, sometimes, we've had challenges with implementation of things across the district. And I was curious, once we get past the training and onboarding phase of this, what will an implementation kind of report out, or how will we know if this is being actively used within, all parts of the district? What will that look like? And how will we know if this is a successful launch?
Yes, so I believe there are certain analytics around access that exist within the PowerSchool platform. And I think the other option would be, as we think about data collection for the strategic plan more broadly, through, for example, staff surveys, asking staff about the frequency with which they're accessing or using this dashboard could be one way we measure success of this. I think, too, we can sort of think about this long term, but, presence or use of this dashboard in our quarterly step back meetings, in other PD sessions. So I think success may look different for different user groups. I could imagine for folks at the network level who may be engaging with this on a daily basis, and that is what success is, whereas maybe an individual classroom teacher is checking it weekly or monthly, and that might be what success is. So I think we have to define those metrics, and those have yet to be determined.
Awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate that information. Any other board members or student reps have questions about the data update? Okay, then I think we can. Oh, yeah, Board Member Upperman, go ahead.
I just wanted to say this was really good.
Thank you, Board Member Upperman. Beautiful. So I think we can move on to our staffing update.
Yep, so we're going to have Haley stay up, and then we're going to have her joined by our Executive Director of Equity, Barrett Wilkinson, our Executive Director of HR, Jennifer Slaybank, and our Director of many things, but primarily Diversity and Leadership Pipeline, Julia Hazel.
There we go. Well, thank you for having us up again. A little more data talk this evening. And while Haley is not planning to be part of the verbal presentation, I think you'll see as we go through the slides that Haley is absolutely part of this presentation. So thank you so much to Haley for all of her help in getting this information into tables and pie charts and really great things that are certainly not in my wheelhouse. So really appreciate that. I also, before I started presenting, I wanted to say a thank you to Anya. I really appreciated your student report tonight, and it just made me feel really good and positive and energetic about the future on a day that I hadn't really been feeling that way. So thank you very much for that. So we wanted to share with you this evening a little bit around our staffing data now that we've submitted our report to the state. Yay, that was, as I think Ryan asked me, if I felt pretty good. Several people told me that the smile on my face was a little bigger. We were very happy to have our state report completed. It was a big lift. And so we want to be able to share with you just some of our current staffing information around demographics, trends, retention data, and also to be able to acknowledge that while we see great strengths in our data, we also, of course, look at our data as an opportunity to assess for areas for growth. So I am not doing the first couple slides. I'm going to pass it over to Barrett.
Getting this all set up. Good evening, everyone. Barrett Wilkinson, Executive Director of Equity and Belonging. Well, this isn't an update on 4.1. I did that last time I was with you a couple weeks ago. This data most strongly relates to that, so we just wanted to call it out as it's related to our people work and our people goal. But that goal is all about the work we're doing to develop staff and leaders and our organizational culture. And so key to that is retention. Of course, for all organizations, high turnover is very costly, right? And for schools, it directly impacts student achievement. So the more we can reduce that, the better off we are in service of our students. The first 5 years for teachers is the most critical, according to data, and the time when they need the most sort of professional development. And so TNTP, which is our annual staff survey, which I'm going to share some data with you about later, that is why they track this. And that is why we're going to be talking about retention as part of this. So we have high educator retention as opposed to compared to the state average, according to a sort of point in time study we were able to do last year with the DOE. And so this is positive. In this chart, both teachers and support specialists, they would be actually in the same group in our organization. So that would be support specialists would be occupational therapists and speech therapists and folks like that, in addition to teachers, and then educational technicians. Obviously, this doesn't show us everyone in the district, but this just shows us a little bit, a little touchstone of how we're doing with some teacher retention. And then one of the reasons why I think that's happening is because we're explicitly focusing on it. And so focusing on retention has to be intentional in order for it to be successful. We explicitly focused on retention in leadership professional development last year. And I'm pleased to see it positively reflected. And I hadn't compared this data until preparing for this presentation. And so I apologize that it's quite small, but this is just 4 of the areas that staff were asked year over year about retention strategies that they experienced. So in the past year, a leader at my school has provided me with regular positive feedback, encouraged me to continue teaching at my school, recognized my accomplishments publicly, identified opportunities for me to pursue teacher leadership roles. These are all key retention strategies, and these are free. These do not cost us money, but this is about intentionally realizing that folks need feedback. Folks need to know, like, when am I on the right track? When am I not? And to have the opportunity to hear from their leadership around that. TNTP, because they benchmark our survey along with others nationally, they know that top teachers who experience 2 or more of these types of retention strategies plan to keep teaching at their schools nearly twice as long as teachers who don't experience these retention strategies. So that's why it's so important, and that's why I wanted to share this data with you.
Okay, so moving a little bit into our staffing reporting data. So as I mentioned, we do have the data that we reported to the state just last month at the end of October. And we do report this data annually. We did a lot of cleanup this year. I shared about that at our committee meeting, so I won't go too deeply into that tonight. But it does give us a lot of information around the FTE status, credentialing, certification information, years of experience, education levels, and all of that for our staff. We also have district staff demographic data that we've been collecting for a while. It's typically captured during our onboarding process, although there are ways for staff to go in and update that. And specifically, that's looking at racial ethnic identities of our staff. And that is data that we're required to collect, but also it informs us in terms of how we look at our hiring processes and the direction that we might take. So the data give us sort of a high-level overview of our staff, and then it gives us ideas of where we might want to pivot or look for different opportunities for growth. So a couple of things about our staff as we look at 24-25. We hired close to 200 new employees for the 24-25 school year, and it sounds like a lot. That is across all of our groups, and we are a pretty large district staffing-wise, so around 200 new employees is in line with what it's been in previous years. 184 new staff specifically. In October alone, we brought on 25 new substitutes, so that was very exciting. Thank you. I think that might be due in part to board approval of some new rates. And then we also have had over 150 stipended and temporary positions. Where we see room for growth and room for continued work is around our ed tech vacancies and specialized program roles. Really, our special education roles are some of our hardest to fill at this time. And again, I know I've said it at multiple meetings, that's pretty consistent with the state, with the nation. That's the trend we're seeing right now. So we have continued work to do to look to creating pipelines and other opportunities to bring staff to Portland Public Schools. So we want to make sure when we look at that data that we reported this state, we do look at our violations report because we want to make sure that the staff that we have working with our students and in front of our kids are highly qualified, certified staff. And so initially we get this violation report, and then we kind of want to hone in a little bit more on it to ensure that we don't have a lot of concerns, and where we do have concerns that we have a plan to address those same things. So when I looked at that initial violation report, I go, okay, and we sort of dig through it. And what we found is that of the people that come up as a violation, mostly were not concerned. But the examples I gave here are for teachers who are J1 visa visiting teachers. They're not required to have a certification. They are vetted fully through that process of application for the J1 visa. And so we can kind of say, okay, those don't sit in the violation pool. We can remove them from that. We identified 25 teachers with certification applications in process. These are staff that are coming to us maybe with a credential from out of state, or they have finished a program, and we are able to review their data, and we know that they're in process with the state, or the state has sent them a letter saying you're eligible for conditional, so let us know if you want it, and then they have to actually generate it, which can take a while. So we have a number of people in that, but we're confident that within, just within the DOE timelines, that will have those 2 emergency certifications. One of those emergency certifications, just since we prepared the slideshow on Thursday or Friday of last week, one of them already got that to come through from the state. So it's exciting when we get those emails. And then there's 6 people that we're working with the DOE to resolve because there's some questions. We think they're eligible, and we're kind of trying to work through and make sure everything's been provided that's necessary. We have 10 staff that, again, no concern. We've applied for waivers with the state. And the difference, just to sort of point out, I think it might be in the next slide. Don't want to get ahead of myself. I'll wait. So we have 10 people that we've applied for waivers with the state. 5 of those are administrators, again, have certifications like from another state, and they've moved to Maine. And so they're in the process of doing that work to get their certification transferred over. I think myself, I think Dr. Scallon, a handful of people may have come in at just the right time. I know when I came here, I was eligible for a conditional certification right off the bat, but the law changed, and if I entered Maine now, I would not be eligible for that. So there are some changes where I'd have to be put on a waiver if I had come into the state a couple of years later than I did. And then we have 12 staff that I would say out of our 1,600 or so people in that system, we have 12 people that truly, we would say, okay, these are people that are out of compliance, and we have work to do to help support them in their growth to get them into compliance. I would just highlight that in large part, these are staff where maybe there's a mismatch. They might have an elementary certification, but they're currently teaching in a special ed classroom and doing coursework to get that special ed certification. So they have a certification. It just may not be fully aligned with where they're teaching at the moment, and they're working on it. And where we might have a couple of staff who are questioning if they want to do the work to get their certification, or if this is the right path, then we can work to support them too. But our goal with these 12 people is to have a plan, working with staff in Barrett's office, Beth and Julia, to ensure that we have plans. And Julia will talk a little later about some of our pipeline opportunities for staff to move through and get the appropriate certification. So I mentioned these alternate options for people who are working towards certification. We do have emergency certifications available to our staff, as well as the waivers. So for staff who are hired and they're working in identified areas of need, like elementary education is considered an identified area of need, If we have a staff member that we want to bring on board and they're close to certification, but they don't quite have what they need, but they're the person that we really want, we can apply for an emergency certification. And we do have 7 employees currently with those emergency certs, and 2 employees that I had on the past slide who are working with it, one of whom I already shared with you already. It just came through in the last couple of days, so that was exciting. And then for waivers, it's for people who are not in those state identified areas of need, administrators, but also special education is not on that emergency certification list. So we do have some staff where we've applied for those waivers, and again, then we support those staff on that pathway to getting the coursework done that they need to have their conditional and then professional certification. So one of our board members had specifically requested some data around our middle school certification. And so this is a little bit, maybe a little bit more of a sidebar conversation that I'm happy to have, but I'll share publicly here just this data around our middle school staff and content area, the 4 core content areas plus special education, and looking at what the certification type is. And the reason this one's a little bit clumsy is because there's this 5.8 certification that used to exist as a certification on its own and now is an endorsement to another certification. So if someone has that content certification, they're on here and they're not listed twice. So if someone has it as either their certification or their endorsement, in other words, they've taken the coursework required to really specifically focused on that 5-8 middle school age group. Outside of that, on the one side, you can see people who have a content-specific certification, either grade 7-12 or 6-12, because again, that's shifted over time, but they have that content area, so maybe a 6-12 math certification. And on the other side of that 5-8, you've got the general elementary, which is this K-8 certification. But those are people who are teaching in our middle schools and maybe teaching content specific. And then also our special ed. And you can see there are a couple of people with no certification in that special ed section, because those are people that we have either waived or are working on a path to certification. So that's what our middle school data looks like. And as I said, I'm happy to meet and sort of dig deeper into what that looks like for some of those folks that might have. There's a number of people at our middle school that have multiple endorsements. And so I just listed one here for sake of keeping the numbers not looking like we had hundreds of middle school teachers. And then, this pie chart, thank you so much. You can see Haley's work here. So we've got a pie chart just sort of looking at the percentages of our staff. We have 1,271 permanent staff. Of course, we have more staff than that when you get into some of our subs and our stipended positions and things, but currently 1,271 permanent staff or probationary staff. And they're broken down. I want to just clarify, because I think when we think PEA, our PEA organization is more than just our teachers. It does also include our ed techs and our SEC, our student enrichment coordinators. They are also technically part of PEA, so I do want to highlight that. But in this pie chart, when we see PEA, that's specifically referring to like our teachers, our counselors. I had a list of all the people, but we have a lot of staff that sort of fall under that teacher contract, and a lot of them are not teachers, but still sit under that teacher contract. And then you can see that's 63%. You can see our ed techs currently at about 16%, our base at about 12%. SEC is a pretty small number of people, 0.5%, non-rep, non-bargaining staff at 6%, and PAA, which are our administrators, at 2.5%. And just for comparative purposes, that's current data for 2023. That was 15% for base, 15% for ed techs, 7% for non-bargaining, 2% for admin, 55% for PEA, that group of teachers, counselors, et cetera. And then we actually had a statistics of 5% for subs and temps. And that's not reflected in here because we've really sort of shifted our model and trying to move away from bringing temporary people on and really looking at our positions and bringing permanent staff on where we feel staff is necessary, rather than sort of having a bunch of temporary people. So I think that is my final slide. I'm going to pass it back over to Barrett.
So since 2016, we have been pulling out the staff racial diversity demographic in order to track this. We have an ongoing workforce disparity, not just we, Portland Public Schools, but we in education. And so we have been tracking that year over year to really assess how we're doing. In the prior strategic plan, we had a specific goal around this, which we met after just a couple years. So, you know, this is really just ongoing attention, as I would see it. And while we've sort of held strong through last year, even with, you know, very serious budget changes and things like that, you'll see in a future slide, we have seen a reduction in some particular groups that, you know, is concerning and cause for attention. So overall, we're still making progress, not as fast as any of us, I'm assuming I'm speaking for you too, not as fast as any of us would like. But thanks again, Haley, she did the kind of percent change over time. While since 2016, our BIPOC student enrollment has increased 21%. Our BIPOC staff representation has increased 129%. So over time, still making gains, though within our workforce of adults, not necessarily where we want it to be. So we've lost a little ground in our ed tech group and teacher group. The N is very small for, you know, our number of staff representing. So the number that can change this is very few, but we actually can't afford to lose any BIPOC staff because we do have such an imbalance. So that's why I started out by talking about retention strategies and why they're so important. So that's, you know, overall, we're holding steady and making some gains with administrators, perhaps, but, you know, with student-facing positions in teaching and ed techs, continue to have work to do. So, you know, is not a time where we can let our foot off the gas. And, you know, I think that there are some, you know, there's some opportunities for us. And I'll be turning it over to Julia momentarily to talk about some of the work we're doing. But in general, our workforce is very qualified. We have some really good retention of staff, and we have some things in place that are helping bolster that retention. And while there's progress over time, you know, it is not, you know, it's not consistently increasing. So, you know, we have a continued need to keep looking at the data and reflecting on those that are drivers of the less favorable outcomes. So, I want to pass it over to Julia Hazel, who's our Director of Career Pathways and Leadership Development, and have her talk about some of the work that's available to staff to advance within our district. You can.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Julia Hazel, and I just want to say I appreciate everything you on the board do to support the public schools. So this is my 4th year in my current role, and it has been really exciting to see the work of career pathways continue to expand and strengthen over that time. So Elevating Educators is a program that I launched to really create a supported career pathway for ed techs who are moving into teaching roles. So our target audience for this primarily was people who are currently ed techs, but it also includes some people who are newly in teaching roles. And just in terms of, and it is kind of like a tiered pathway with different entry points. So for some people, the support that they need is really coursework. Like, what is the college coursework needed to earn the certification, like Jennifer was saying? There's some advising that goes into that, recommending, okay, looking at your transcript, here's what you're going to need. Here's how you go about applying for teacher certification. That, I would say, was probably the easiest piece to bite off because learning how to navigate that and then sharing that with others, and then helping them find the classes, that this grant that we receive for $250,000 is really exciting, because what it's going to enable us to do is, beyond being able to support people with that traditional coursework, we'll be able to help them have student teacher type experiences. So for special education, aspiring special education teachers, give them opportunities to learn some of the case management and skills that are not included in courses. For people who want to go and become classroom teachers, giving them opportunities to have like a gradual release, gaining more experience in a classroom. These are things that in the past, people going through traditional teacher preparation programs would take a semester unpaid, actually paying for supervision to get a student teaching experience. That's just not practical for the people that who are our employees. We have a lot of very talented ed techs who are really skilled at working with students already, many of whom have, particularly among our immigrant ed techs, many of whom have teaching experience previously, and are working as ed techs as more of a transitional role. So really, I see elevating educators as removing the barriers to allow people with the skills and the desire to teach to get there. And so really, a lot of those barriers are things that we can remove. And a big part of how the program has been formed has been through talking with the people themselves about what do they need, what do they want, what's been getting in their way. And so just in terms of like, when we talk about recruitment strategies, this is a really powerful one, because I think when we talk about this part of the strategic plan about valuing staff, when people have the opportunity to make the career moves that they want, when people have the opportunity to develop skills and gain a position, and feel like they don't have to do that on their own, they can do that in community, they can do that with support, including financial support that makes it possible, then that can be really transformative. And we have a little over 1/4 of our ed techs currently are BIPOC. And so when we think about, and we look at the teacher percentage still being only, I think, 9% of our teachers BIPOC, and we have this large number of BIPOC ed techs who want to become teachers, we have a very natural internal pathway that's win-win. But I also want to say that our elevating educators is for our white staff as well. We have ed techs who may have been working as an ed tech for years and years, but really have been observing teachers gaining skills and want to have their own classrooms or that lead teacher role. We also, much smaller than the teacher one, and not funded through that teacher apprenticeship grant, but we have been piloting a social work pipeline. We currently have been funding 3 BIPOC current ed techs to get their master's in social work, because we know that there's a even more severe racial disparity in our social workers, and particularly, you can imagine how important it is to have more multilingual social workers, as well as a racially diverse group of social workers for our students who are leaning on them. So I guess I'll just say to close this slide that the photo is from last spring's, from May. We had a celebration with all of our first and second year BIPOC teachers. We just honored them with a dinner, invited their mentors, and heard a little bit about the success of their year. So a big part of the strategy is community too, because, you know, we can do hard things in community much better than we can on our own. And so I really envision the future of elevating educators having people who have gone through that process of ed tech to teacher, becoming the mentors, becoming the, and really seeing kind of generations like that. So these are some other ways that we have been advancing our pipeline. And so the first bullet point, mentoring, this is our second year after having made a big shift in the way we approach new teacher induction and making sure that new teachers get really robust support and it's related because more and more of the teachers we're hiring are not coming out of traditional teacher preparation programs. They may need additional supports in their first year's teaching. And we really believe, and elevating educators doesn't drop people also when they get hired as a teacher. It continues to add those layers of support and coaching. So working with Beth Linovich, we redesigned the mentoring so that it was more equitable in a number of ways. For one thing, we realized that new teachers were often not experiencing belonging. So we very deliberately created both a team mentor, somebody on their team who's really checking in and bringing them in, including them, but also putting new teachers into little cohorts. So they're meeting weekly with a more experienced teacher, but with other newer teachers so that they can share their struggles together and just realize that they're not alone in that and that there can kind of be this collective learning experience. We also really wanted to say to the mentors, some of you have been mentoring new teachers for 15 years, but we really believe that the work of coaching and mentoring newer teachers is like we have a lot to learn, we have a lot to reflect on, and we really want that mentoring to be from an equity lens. And so we've started a community of practice that meets monthly with those mentors to really kind of elevate that as a teacher leadership position, because truly we are leaning on those current veteran teachers to help with our retention, right? Teachers who feel supported, teachers who get the feedback that they need, are teachers who will be successful and be able to persist. And the equity hiring is an ongoing initiative, as you know, as well as equity literacy PD. So there's a lot we could talk about. There's a lot of stories I could tell you. This is my all day, every day, but I'll just open it to questions. Oh yeah, thank you. Barrett's gonna bring you, the guide that we just published. That is really to be facing the educators themselves who are interested in this pathway so that they can have very clearly laid out what are the competencies that are needed to be successful as a classroom teacher, and kind of what are the steps to take to get there. And this will be aligned with that formal apprenticeship competencies that people have to sign off on.
Very good.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So I'm happy to open it up to questions from the board now. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I got a lot, so I'll do a few, and then when other people have a chance, I'll go back. And it's for various people. I was wondering if current staff has been, this is about SPED teachers, has current staff been asked how to get more SPED teachers from other places? And I wonder what they said, if they were asked.
I mean, I think we will take all the referrals that we can get. And I'm probably not supposed to go back to the former district where I worked and ask people, but I know some really great people there. So I know I put the all call out whenever I can. The truth is,
current ones.
Yeah, our current. I mean, the truth is we have very few people even applying for our special ed positions. And so I think that, I appreciate hearing about the pipelines. I know that I've been talking with someone about some other pipeline options as well. And I think that really looking at students who are in college right now getting their teacher certifications and working to create pathways to get them to come to Portland and work for Portland is going to be a great next step. And I know between the apprenticeship programs that Julie is working with and a couple of other conversations I've been having, I'm hopeful that we can kind of make that a little more robust. Especially I think in terms of all of our teaching areas and diversifying our workforce, but really specifically around special ed. That's where my brain has been sitting. especially as we got the staffing data. And how, looking at our ed techs, our special ed techs, because we've got some amazing special ed techs, and several of them are sitting in long-term sub roles right now and are very successful in that. And I think sort of working to find out if those are people who also might want to be supported in moving into a teaching role on a full-time basis, because they're doing a great job, right? So why not kind of look at whether that's a career path that we can support them on, if that's what they want to do.
Well, and that moving on to the career path, but also the following up those individuals moving into a new position, even though they might have been in ed tech, moving into the teaching position, and having them supported in those first 5 years, actually, 3 years minimal, is really important. But I guess the other question I haven't, like I said, there are
I'm
other
making
questions.
Barrett come back up here so that we can all stand up here together.
Yeah.
And Board Member Opperman, why don't you
Yes.
do 3 questions, and then
Okay.
we'll go through, and then if you still have remaining questions, we can circle back if we have time.
I guess the other question is, who's doing the coaching? Are you doing all the coaching, Julia, for these teachers going through the new programs?
So the past 2 years, I've coached some of the past 2 years, we've provided new teacher coaching as a layer added on to our regular, new teacher mentoring, and as a layer on top of the instructional coaching that teachers get through that position in their schools. We've added that to BIPOC staff, about a dozen each year. And I've done about a third, I've coached about a third of those people, and we've hired a consultant to coach the other 2/3. This year, we have a bit of a transition as we're getting these new funds. So I've been doing the coaching for the start of this year.
Do that. I'll stop there and I'll come back when, okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Board Member Opperman. Vice Chair Bondo, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions, but I will just go with 2 or 3. All right. So when I look at the 4.1, I see then we are on the design, right? So I was expecting to see redesign, because I remember a couple of years ago when we invest for Julia's position, it was to build those strategy after the BIPOC report to make sure then we can empower them, building different strategy to make sure they have a better culture in our school building so we can retain them. But when I see since 3 years, the number on our educator been flat, 9% to 8%. So I'm still wondering, where are we going? I'm still asking myself, because I see the administration weekly higher, but the support of the student that we need the most, we don't get it. And then we see now with the budget restriction coming, we have a lot of position then we have to cut. And when I look at the EdTech, I feel like that's just my assumptions. The most of the position cut being the BIPOC EdTech who left. So I'm just wonder if we're going to the right path. This is a lot of frustration on my side, because I was among the board really invested that to make sure we can gain them. Because our student landscape is higher, but we don't matching, like you just mentioned, we don't match with the educators. So that's what I want to ask. Which pathway, if we try to design now, that means something then we have done didn't work really well, so we try to build some different ways to build those capacity and try to retain or attract BIPOC educator and staff.
Yeah.
So this is a general question.
Yeah, I can speak to that. That's the big question, right? Why isn't it working faster, right? And I definitely feel that frustration, right? And that pain. A lot of the people that we, the BIPOC teachers who we don't retain, I know them all personally. I know their stories. I know the situations. So this is definitely on my mind a lot. And I think that there's a few things at play. So one learning has been, and and this leads to why the creation of the guide that you have, is realizing that getting people to be credentialed in the eyes of the state is not the same as getting them to be prepared and fully ready to enter the classroom on a similar developmental trajectory as, because we have a very short 2-year probationary window. And so when we hire teachers, we need to ensure that they are at a point where they don't have to be fully proficient across the board yet, but they need to be, they need to be able to show development and growth in that period. And that also means that we need to have structures in place to really provide robust supports, right? And to coordinated supports between schools and central folks. Also, I would say that you brought up the Educator of Color report, and I find that, I'm always thinking, when I talk to individuals, I take their stories, but really their stories are helping to illustrate both the walls of impenetrable whiteness and the smog of cultural racism. And I think that as I sort of can see more clearly the different walls and obstructions, we're able to create pathways that move around those, that help people navigate those. I think that work of really building culture to be anti-racist, really looking at is slow. And it's frustrating that it's slow. I think it's probably slow everywhere. And what's rough is that slowness is on the backs of like real people, right? But I think that one of the things is, I think as we continue all these different fronts, like just this work of increasing the number of BIPOC staff is connected to so many elements of our equity work. Working on staff culture to make sure staff feel valued. When we center the experiences of marginalized people, that's going to improve the experience in our schools for all of our staff. So I think we have to keep pressing, and we have to keep talking, and we have to keep doing that work, and it's slow. And I think I see that some of those top layers of how do we do that, we've already peeled back. So now we're getting into like the really challenging parts where there's really some rub of like, this is hard, what are we willing to change? What are we not willing to change? Having hard conversations.
Thank you. I feel like, they are still surviving. They are not thriving, but they're still surviving mode. So we still have a lot to do.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bondo. Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. I think my question is for Barrett, but I was wondering about the equity hiring toolkit and your assessment of how it's going. And if this is outside the scope of this presentation, it was on one of Julia's slides, so it just got, and it's getting to all of what Julia's talking about, in terms of changing culture and moving to an anti-racist school district. And I think we are still doing hiring where we're hiring people who do not have that mindset. And so I'm wondering, I see that. And I'm wondering if you see that, and if so, how do we close that gap? I know it's continued work to educate everyone and develop their skills and ability to assess candidates using all the tools in the toolkit. But in any case, I'd love to hear your reflection on that.
Yeah, I think that, like Julia was saying, it's really big work, and we've got to get all hiring managers, and as we get new hiring managers, really get them grounded in that continually. And so I can say that it is explicit professional development again this year to be doing with hiring managers, and that in collaboration with Jennifer, like really helping them anchor like all hiring is equity hiring, and like here's how we do it, like, and here's how we get at that, right? Like it's not the equity hiring toolkit over here and everything else HR wants you to do. Like these are the same thing because it's getting us towards our collective strategic goals. But I mean, I think the other thing I was thinking about is that we've been invited to a convening next month because there's a lot of national movement around hiring Black teachers. And so there's the 1 Million Black Teachers Project. They're doing this New England convening that we were invited to. So I'm hopeful that there's some things for us to learn about like what else, like where else do we go with this as we continue to go deeper in our 4.1 strategy, which is all about belonging. Because we already knew that we had room to do that. That's why it's a strategic priority. And, you know, the hiring piece of it is really key. So that's my sort of off the top of mind thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. It just seems so challenging when we're bringing new people in who don't share the mindset that we're trying to move towards. And
I will share one interesting reflection with you. So during new employee orientation every year, we do equity literacy as part of that orientation. And I've always asked the group of new teachers, this is the new teacher part of it, not just new employees, but new teacher, I've always asked them, have you had training on diversity, equity, inclusion as part of your teacher preparation program? And for years, I'd have like 2 people raise their hands, and they were coming from out of state usually. And now just the last 2 years, almost everyone in the room is raising their hands. So the teacher prep programs are catching up to this need, and that it is a skill you have to have if you're entering the teacher workforce. Now, not exactly directly related to that, but it is something that more people are coming with more skills in potentially if they're going in a traditional teacher prep program. So it's just one thing that I just thought of when you were.
one last follow-up, I'll try and be quick, but, and I'm not sure when we have panels evaluate candidates and when it's a more streamlined process. But when we do have panels that involve, for instance, students, and are we doing equity training for all the panelists so they understand the toolkit and are oriented towards it?
That is where I think we have room to grow. That is the expectation. What's happening site by site, I would say that's where we have room to like really get clearer about how to do that. We printed hundreds of the equity hiring toolkits so that if you're on a hiring panel, you get that, and the hiring manager is doing orientation to say, this is the job, this is job description, these are the competencies, here's how we're going to assess it, and here's the grounding I need you to understand about bias in hiring and our process and why we do it this way and all of that. So that is 100%, what I think about in terms of where the work needs to go. There should not be anyone hiring individually, really. Like it should be by panels. Even if the panel is 2 or 3, like it should not be an individual like, yep, here's the job. Welcome to teaching for the next 40 years. I really don't think that's happening. And, in the past, we have done some audits of the hiring process. And so it's likely time to pick that back up to see, okay, if I look at hiring file from HR from a school, do I see questions that drive towards equity of the candidates? Do I see who is on the hiring committee? Can I tell that the hiring committee has a student on it, has maybe a parent, has different types of teachers sitting on that? And so we haven't done that audit for a couple of years, but it's likely time to kind of do that kind of sample audit review. Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Board Member Figdor. Board Member Billiou?
Thank you. I think some of my questions were asked, but yeah, I was going to ask about that audit and what has the process been like? Because I think a lot of what I'm sensing is a lot of the issue is the culture and the fact that because you can hire as many Black and Brown teachers as you want, but when they come here and they're being abused and racially abused, systemically abused, we can't retain them. And so it's our problem to then solve the culture, not for them to stay here or for us to retain them. And so I'm honestly really disappointed by this because it's this has been the issue that has been happening in public schools for literally ever. And so if it's can we not fix this problem? I don't understand. What do we need to do to ensure safety and to make sure that these teachers do have the capacity to stay here and then serve our students and Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, when I was here, there was only one teacher. And so to think that like that's just what's happening, that one teacher has to be the one to take that like burden of like being the safety for other students just sounds crazy to me. And so I guess I'm just alarmed at like what isn't working.
Well, I think something that's coming to mind as you're speaking, first, I'll say that I don't have it with me, but we have many of our schools have multiple BIPOC teachers, and all of our schools have multiple BIPOC staff members. So I do think that only one phenomenon in a very like stark sense of the word is reduced, which is huge. And I see that schools that have more BIPOC staff, I noticed that more BIPOC staff feel comfortable to work there. So there's definitely like a tipping point phenomenon. Something I have been really messaging when I'm talking with groups of teachers or leading professional development is that this is an organizational problem. It doesn't live in one department. It doesn't live in one role. And that everyone needs to take ownership for our culture, and that whatever your sphere of influence, if your sphere of influence is you are work next door to a new BIPOC teacher, then you have a pretty important sphere of influence just in terms of those day in, day out interactions. So I really think that this is going to be a collective effort, and really like continuing to message that everyone has a part to play in this, and there's not sort of like, and that everyone has something to gain from this too, from having a like truly multicultural staff where people feel valued and affirmed for everything they're bringing. Like,
Thank you. Yeah, I think that is important. And I think that's, I don't know. I think it's just hard for me to see like how this can be mended because it is our culture, and our culture has been like this for so long. And I feel like there has been a lot of opportunities and attempts, but I'm just like, I don't know if this is just like me kind of going, just being emotionally like, I don't know, distraught. But yeah, like, I guess I'm just really stuck on this, like, how do we change the culture if this just continues to be the case? And like, obviously, like you said, it's nobody to blame, but there has to be a sense of like, do we need outside help? Like, do we need outside consulting? Like, how do we get to the point of at least starting at step one of like, maybe, yeah, I'm just going to stop speaking, but thank you.
I wasn't trying to say, I really appreciate you saying this, because I think that pain that you're feeling, like thinking back to being a student and like now being on the board and just feeling like we're not accelerating this change fast enough, right? For the sake of the students who are at our school, right? We know that even one school year is like a tremendous amount of time, right? And, but I was not trying to say that don't blame anyone for this. What I was actually trying to say was like, this is a shared responsibility. So it's my responsibility, but it's also like each staff member's responsibility plays a part in shaping the culture.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, like, yes, it's the collective responsibility. And unfortunately, sometimes that's like the individualism that has to be done, or the work that has to be done individually. And we can't like hold everybody's hand and say that like you need to prioritize, you know, deconstructing your whiteness, or like how, and even like what you were saying, this is another question I was going to ask, what you were saying about those teachers, because you can train a teacher and obviously do the work for them to become certified, but then like getting into the classroom where that position is heavily white centered, those kids are expecting a white person, and you know that cultural shift, or like that cultural shock, then literally stops the teacher from being able to teach that class. And so that's so, I guess, getting really intricate and into the weeds, but that is like such a huge restriction.
Yeah.
Even if they're like the best teacher ever, if they go into that room and they just cannot like sustain like this type of, interaction with their students, because their students are just expecting a whole different power dynamic. Like, how do we get through that? I guess that's where I'm like mentally, because if we're training them, are we preparing them for those, like that type of cultural shock where they might not be able to, because I've had a teacher say that like she wasn't able to get through to her teachers to her students. And it's like, if our own students don't even expect to have a black or brown teacher, that's a problem as well. And so, I guess I appreciate this. And Barrett, I think I would like to know more about the audit or a potential process for that. I think that is important as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Board Member Billio. Board Member Opperman, I see your hand, but I'm going to ask a couple questions first. First, I just wanted to just recognize, like, hearing these updates for the last several years, I do think that you're doing a really phenomenal job of identifying barriers and finding long-term solutions to them. Often this kind of work isn't funded or supported within institutions. And so I think the fact that this work is continued in such a way, and that there's long-term funding for this, I just really, really appreciate that. And I know that that is not easy work to do. I think of the kind of the things that you were talking about tonight, the thing that really excited me, three BIPOC social workers potentially coming into our district, like the impact of that is phenomenal. And I know that that feels like a small piece when we're thinking about the whole system changing overall, but I do think that that is like a pretty incredible win. And the fact that you are setting up like systems within our institution that will continue to work, like that is operationalizing equity, and that is super effective, and it does take a long time, but those are the things that when you talk about them really excite me, because it does make me hopeful. So just thank you. And then my question was around those retention strategies and the data that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. I was just curious if we are disaggregating that and looking to see like where are those retention strategies being used across staff? Like is that, and the ones that Jennifer was talking about, asking people to stay or teach more, the free ones, are those being targeted in certain places? So I would love to know that. And I don't think that we have to get into this tonight, but then I would like to see, in addition to our retention data, the next time is like, where are we losing staff? And if there's any data that can be shared so that, Julia, I think that will help the board with our accountability and thinking about like where are the places that we are not able to retain staff and what can the board be doing to support that. So those would just be kind of like two things that I would love to see in the next round of presentations.
We have some of that data disaggregated, so I can certainly share that and follow up.
That'd be great.
It's district level, so it won't be like site based or anything like that, but that is one thing we absolutely have.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to go back to Board Member Opperman. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to piggyback on what Member Billio was brought up, because in that the impact of teachers on students and students on teachers, and we're talking about belonging, and I think we talk a lot about belonging among the teachers, which is important and needs to be emphasized. But in a conversation, and it wasn't overt, one point it was, with a group of students this past week, I noted there was a person who felt that they needed to have more BIPOC, a Black teacher, because they could relate to them, which is absolutely true. And then, as opposed to relating to a white teacher. And then I heard a white student say they were having difficulties, and it was not on it was on language, the multilingual type thing, understanding what was going on. And I guess and some of the conversations I've had with teachers in the past who have left, who were white, that there is a very big cultural thing that's not just among the teachers. And I think that it's among the students still. They say they want to be diverse, and I believe they believe that. I know, but I don't know that they being everybody up the stream from students and teachers, but that they don't know how or when or what they're doing that prevents them from being, from making someone feel belong. And so I guess so my question, that's my statement, right? Following up to because it's just hearing it on all of the different places. Is the difficulty with belonging happening in any particular level of education? Is it in the elementary, in the middle, in the high school? Is there any more in one or the other? Do you know? As you're thinking, where are the teachers and among themselves and the teachers and the students feeling more of a community? Is there anything that you recognize at this point?
I haven't thought to look at that, but TNT may have some things that provide some proxy explanation for that. So I can certainly look at it with that lens.
The reason I asked that is in the elementary level, we were talking about earlier with learning to get along, taking turns, all that kind of stuff that we work with all the time in an elementary situation stops happening. And so at the upper levels, the expectation is it happens. So I'm just wondering if the teachers.
Off top of mind, I'm not sure, but I can look at it.
Oh, that was just something I'd like to know. Sure. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for that report. Dr. Scallon, I see your hand just popped up. Nope, just kidding. I was just curious, since Jennifer Slaybank is already up at the podium still, maybe, if we could go ahead and do personnel while you're there, and then we'll move on to the MainePERS update. So do you want to speak to the motion, Jennifer?
I would just say we just have one person in front of you this evening, a probationary teacher, and you'll probably notice that it says date TBD, and that is simply because we're in the middle of the onboarding process, and we really hoped we'd have a start date for you to be able to give you a revised tonight. We don't have the start date yet, but we're hopeful that we'll be able to have this person in position and starting before the next board meeting, which is why we wanted to get it approved tonight so we can move forward. And very excited to have a special ed teacher at Ocean Ave. So.
Perfect. Yeah, and I've heard we're very excited about her at Ocean Ave, which is great. So could I have a motion for the consideration and action to approve this personnel item, selection of a teacher candidate probationary? Thank you, Board Member Opperman. Is there a second? Thank you, Board Member Bryden. We don't take public comment on any personnel items. Any general discussion or questions from the board? Okay. Seeing none, then by roll call vote, please indicate whether you are in favor of the consideration action to approve the personnel item listed, election of teacher candidate probationary. Dr. Warren, can you call the roll?
Member Ali?
Yes.
Member Bilyeu?
Yes.
Vice Chair Bondo?
Yes.
Member Bryden?
Yes.
Member Figdor?
Yes.
Member Grant is absent. Member Noor?
Yes.
Member Opperman?
Yes.
Student Representative Hayden?
Yes.
Student Representative Kantiba is absent. Student Representative Knight is absent. Student Representative McDonald just left. Student Representative Rosado is absent, and Representative Kunku is absent. Chair Lentz?
Yes. So the motion passes. Thank you very much. Okay, and now we're going to move back to our second read. Well, actually, last board meeting we moved to table this. Well, we get a little bit more information, so it's back on the table for a vote tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Scallon for him to speak on this motion.
Thank you for that. And if the board will enlighten me just for a minute, I had a conversation with a member of our community the other day, and what they mentioned to me is that when they join a board meeting or they pick up a newspaper or they look at something that we've posted, sometimes they only see what was talked about in that meeting. And so if they aren't able to look back at other meetings or see the full arc, they feel like they've only read part of the chapter of a book or not the whole thing. And so I'm going to give the full arc a little bit of the MainePERS and sort of how we got here, just because this will probably be the last update for a couple of months on this. And so I just want to provide that so if individuals who are listening have the full version of where we're at. Just as a reminder, Reconciling MainePERS reporting is the last system-wide area of correction that was uncovered through the 2022-2023 payroll challenges. What you can see below are 4 areas that came up in those payroll challenges. The first was accurate and timely pay. At that time, we entered into a memorandum of understanding with our PEA, MEA, and BASE members, and that was done in August of 23. And this was addressed through the launch of the new payroll system, ADP, in December of 2023. Voluntary retirement contributions. So most of our staff, or a significant number of our staff, are in MainePERS, but others participate in what is a 403B, similar to a 401k. And there were contributions that needed to be made up and related IRS penalties that came from the payroll challenges that year, and those were finalized in February of 24. Accruals, this is sick and vacation time. These were corrected when it was transitioned to the new payroll system, and they're now maintained automatically. And where we do have any sort of challenges with this, it is through a human error piece and trying to update for individual circumstances, such as an individual joining the system and their accruals needing to be prorated or that type of thing. But in terms of overall correction, that has happened. And so we're in this last area in terms of MainePERS reporting, which is 2 buckets, as we've talked about in the past. One is around estimated payments and making sure that the money has moved from PPS into MainePERS, and that is all caught up and has been maintained since fall of 2023. And the work we've been doing now in partnership with MainePERS, BerryDunn, and in particular PEA, but other staff as well, has really been about making sure that the contribution and service credit reporting has been caught up and is up to date. And so just want to acknowledge that there's been a significant amount of work done in this area to make sure that we're caught up and up to date, and that we're really focused on a significant part of this, this last piece in terms of MainePERS reporting. As you know, a work group was established to correct employee contribution and service credit reporting. This work group is consisted of PPS finance team, our PEA president, Carrie Dowdy, staff from BerryDunn, a large recognized firm of accountants, and MainePERS staff. This work initially focused on July 2022 to March of 23. This was particularly done to make sure that we were looking at a time that was ideally focused before much of the payroll challenges happened. And as I shared with you previously, when we looked at this window of time, 7.5% of pay in this window required further validation. This took a significant amount of time and required individual pay line reviews by BerryDunn, PPS, and MainePERS staff. What also came to light when we did this review was that reporting errors existed outside of that window of time and outside of the 22-23 school year. And our original approach of looking at correcting within errors or within windows of time was not possible, as we discovered that when errors had been corrected in the past, they had sometimes been corrected or adjusted in subsequent months. And so we could not look within a window of time because sometimes corrections happened outside of that window of time. As a result, the MainePERS group, as a collective, decided to shift to a new approach to reconciling accounts prior to the January 2024. What you can see below is an update on this approach. And what we're calling this is the individual review for complete employment. The approach is BerryDunn is now pulling batches of employees and retirees. MainePERS and BerryDunn are reviewing each employee individually for their entire employment history in PPS. They're reviewing to make sure that there's 100% correction and alignment between what is in our system for pay and what is in MainePERS for contributions and service credit. Corrections are then made or will be made in batches of 100 employees at a time. This is because of how MainePERS system works, and so as a function of their system where they have to go in to an individual month at a time to make the corrections, and so it is better and time effective to do it in batches of 100. And then we'll be sending out communication, and they will also be sending out communication once corrections are done so that an employee or a retiree will know that their complete retirement contribution and service credit review is complete and they are considered up to date. In terms of statistics on the new approach, 4 batches have been completed. In each batch, 60 to 80% of employees have had at least one error in their history. These errors have ranged significantly from $50. So in that case, one principal of ours, who is a retiree, received MainePERS credit for a cell phone reimbursement. That is something that is not MainePERS eligible for it. And while this is a minor error, it is something that MainePERS requires that we have corrected. And so in that case, it's a small one. It would not have an impact on their retirement, but MainePERS does require that we have it corrected. On the other side is an example of an error where somebody had $12,000 worth of MainePERS eligible income underreported. In that case, this individual did additional work outside of their teaching job for coaching and other duties. And this is a case where this individual, because this was in one of their highest earning years, would have then seen a lower estimated retirement payment. And so this is a case where it would have impacted. And so we want to make sure, in particular in these cases, that it is corrected. The errors that were identified did represent both a mix of over and underreporting of earnings. And so when folks have asked, what do we anticipate in terms of overall, at this point, we couldn't tell you what it is, but we do expect that there to be a balancing in some cases. When we did the initial review of that window of time, it worked out not to the dollar, but a pretty even balance of over and under reporting. To conduct the individual reviews, we will need to set up and have established initial order of priority in partnership with our union partners and with MainePERS. And so what you see on this slide is how we're going to work to prioritize the order of review. And it's not a hard and fast, but is the general guidelines of how we would go through this. The first group is recent retirees who are awaiting final retirement amounts. This way we can help make sure that they are, as quickly as possible, able to get their final retirement amounts. The second is employees that are close to retirement. So these are individuals that have reached out for estimated payments, and individuals that are significantly along in their seniority in PPS. The third is individuals with significant life events. As I've shared in updates before, these are already individuals that have been prioritized in our work with MainePERS. So this is an individual who may have experienced a death in the family or some other significant life event where we wanted to make sure that their review occurred so that we could make sure that this was not an additional worry in their mind. The fourth is individuals requesting refunds from MainePERS. So individuals who've not vested or have other financial reasons may request a refund instead of going through the annuity process. And there are rules that MainePERS must follow in terms of the timeliness of those refunds. And so in partnership with MainePERS, that's why they sit on that priority list. And then prioritizing current employees based on seniority, and then less recent retirees. And so it's not a hard and fast, but that's the general guidelines on which we are doing this. And so you can sort of think about it in sort of concentric circles, working its way out. The Individual reviews will be labor intensive, and we anticipate that it will take more than a year to complete. And so it will take place for all employees that are between April 1st, 1996 and December 31st, 2023. The reason that those are the dates in which the review happens is April 1st, 1996 represents when we started with 2 payroll systems ago. And so that is the earliest we can go back electronically currently. And so that is why April 1st, 1996 was identified. That was the first system. Then the second system was MainePERS, and then the third is ADP that we're in now. So that was why April 1st, 1996 was selected.
Munis.
Oh, what did I say? Oh, I said MainePERS, sorry. Yes, Munis. I have MainePERS on the mind. This was a little bit of a trivia piece, but this will involve a review of approximately 10,700 employees. The significance of each individual's review will vary quite a bit. And so there are some folks that have been with PPS since 1996 and are still with us. And there are individuals that were here for a month in that time. And so it is not the case that all of these are equal in terms of review. It's also the case that an individual in terms of review is not that significant to time, but you can get a sense of the scale. We do estimate, based on some sampling, that between 55 and 65% of that overall number were members of MainePERS. MainePERS has created tools to support their review, and those tools continue to be refined and allow them to be faster. And so we have increased from the initial batches of 20 that we did in our test cases to now where they're able to process 50 in a week. And they're looking to add further capacity on their side to go up from 50 so that we can further accelerate this. We've committed within our contract with BerryDunn that if their capacity goes up, we will also match it. And so we feel comfortable with that. The reality, though, is that this type of review and doing the individual line-by-line analysis that is necessary to make sure that we get this right, recognizing the scale of this, is simply beyond the capacity of the finance team at PPS. It is for that reason that we have proposed to you the contract with BerryDunn. The $500,000 amount is for the 1 year. And we do anticipate that this will take at least 2 years. As we shared with the Finance Committee at their last meeting, this was an unanticipated and unbudgeted cost, because this was not the original expectation of this need. And so we have done some budget adjustments to be able to absorb this cost, and we shared that with the Finance Committee at their last meeting. The first is that we were able to get grants that are covering $150,000 that were otherwise budgeted to come out of our general fund. And so that's the first $150,000. The second is we have $350,000, actually more than that, but we have $350,000 in vacant salaries. We're only thinking about that as the vacant salaries from the July through October 2024 time. And so this is not a case where we're not trying to still fill those positions, but this is recognizing that even if we filled those positions today, we would still have those savings because of the salaries from October and before. And so I just want to clarify that, because that was a good question that came up from individuals who watched the Finance Committee, is whether or not we were not trying to fill those. That it's not the case. We would still like to fill those positions. Often those are ed tech and special education vacancies, and so we're still actively looking, but those are where the savings are. The contract would allow us to access and review all payroll files, do that reconciliation in partnership with MainePERS, keep and maintain records of all necessary adjustments, as well as which employees were reviewed, and ensure communication with employees once their records are reviewed. The contract will result in a streamlined process. It will also allow our finance team to focus on other priorities and continue the work that needs to happen in finance. Our intent would be to provide you updates on a quarterly basis so that you can continue to monitor this work and to know that it is advancing at the rate that we need it to. And so that would be the plan, was to continue to update the board on a quarterly basis, if that pleases the board. And with that, Chair, I'm happy to turn it back to you and answer any questions or turn it to you for the vote.
Yeah, so board members, I would look to you to see what questions you might have for Dr. Scowen before we take a vote. Yes, Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
Thank you for the update, Mr. Superintendent. I'm wondering, based on my understanding of the MainePERS system, if another district were, clearly this work is absolutely essential, and this plan to get it done in a comprehensive way is very needed. So, but that aside, I'm just wondering your thought on if another district in Maine were going to undertake this same analysis, based on now your very in-depth experience with the MainePERS system. Is your assessment that other districts would find similar problems because the MainePERS system has its challenges, or you think this is unique to our different payroll systems over the last 25 plus years?
So I think MainePERS is uniquely complex, right? I'm not an expert on state pension systems, but I would say that MainePERS is uniquely complex. And I shared a couple of these, but let me just put it in this space here. One is that when we submit the file to MainePERS, we submit it on a notepad system. So it's not an Excel file. It's not something where it's clearly delimited. It's a notepad. And that's a very antiquated sort of way to do it. The second is that the rules in which MainePERS operates can be overly complex for a system of our size, let alone a smaller system. So a staff member who is a teacher and coaches a sport, their earnings as a coach are MainePERS eligible. A bus driver who coaches that same sport, their earnings are not MainePERS eligible because one is a bus driver and one is a teacher. On the same side, if the bus driver collects tickets for that sporting event, their earnings are MainePERS eligible. But if the teacher collects tickets at that sporting event, their earnings are not MainePERS eligible. And so there's complexity that goes to that. It's also the case that if an employee has basis or standing in one plan, they can remain in that plan. And so that can add additional complexity, right? So an employee that would otherwise be, because there's two plans, an employee that would otherwise not be eligible to be in the teacher plan, which is a slightly more favorable plan, if they were previously a substitute, they may actually have standing and be able to be in it. And so again, all of those rules we just talked about in terms of whether your earnings for ticket collecting or coaching count for eligibility for your pension vary just based on whether or not you were a sub. And so these are all things where that complexity directly impact our ability to accurately report for a system that has 1,600 employees on a pay run. And so those are areas that I think make it uniquely complex. I will also say that one of the things that is not MainePERS but is unique to Portland and made our reporting and reconciling of this particularly hard is that in some cases where we were just historically understaffed in finance, it put a significant burden on the individual who was doing it. And so some of the work there, what we're finding is that it wasn't just that a pay code wasn't appropriately attributed to MainePERS, but the individual would manually adjust the report before it went to MainePERS to try to correct for these types of idiosyncrasies. And sometimes they would just make human errors. They would transpose numbers. They would double enter something. And so that's where when you have an accounting firm trying to look for what's the common pattern, what's the error, you can't do it for something like somebody accidentally transposing two numbers. And so that's where it went beyond just MainePERS, but also just added complexity for us.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And just a good reminder about how when we get to budget season and there's talk about any cuts need to be as far away from the students as possible, that has repercussions throughout our district. When we're not adequately staffing our central office, our finance team, et cetera. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Vice Chair Bondo, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Superintendent. I just need a clarification on the 150 that we're getting from the grant revenue, because knowing that most of the grant are project related and coming sometime with restrictions. So I'm just wonder if the one we are using to cover the 150 are just coming for a project, a specific project, or we just will come as a general operational without any restrictions, so we can use those funds.
Yes, so there were two. Thank you for the question. There were two specific expenses that were included in the budget that were specifically offsetting. So one was $100,000 to pay for additional leadership capacity to support with the implementation of the strategic plan. That cost was picked up by a grant from the Barr Foundation that specifically pays for Attuned to support with the implementation of the strategic plan this year. That is also one where we'll see exactly how it works out, but the idea on it is that they're skill building and capacity building within the district so that they're working their way out of the need to do it in the future. And so they're heavily involved in what Dr. Atkinson-Duena talked about with the step backs. The first round, less involved the second round, and so sort of working their way out. So that was the first $100,000. The $50,000 was $50,000 that we budgeted to support with the High School for the Future application with the state, because we knew that we would likely need writing capacity and some expertise capacity. The grant that we received actually, again, from the Barr Foundation to support that work is, again, allowing us to offset that cost.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions from the board? I will just say again that, I think none of us expected this project to get as big as it has. So kind of the scale of what we're looking at is just tremendous. And I think that because it is so tremendous, it's taken a tremendous amount of work from everyone to get us to this place where we now have a scope of work. We have a plan, and we have a way to hold ourselves accountable to fixing the errors. And so I just really would like to offer gratitude to all the people that have stayed at the table and continued to work on this so that we have a path forward to really writing this and continuing to build a strong foundation. So thank you for that. And I see no other hands. So with that, I would be looking for a motion for the consideration and action to approve the contract with BerryDunn to manage reconciling of MainePERS reporting for employees and retirees prior to January 2024. I'd be looking for a motion for that. Thank you, Board Member Noor. I'd look a second. Board Member BerryDunn, thank you very much. Is there any public comment on this motion? And if someone in the room could help me see if there's any public comment. Okay, I see none online. I see no one in the room. Any general discussion from the board? Then by roll call vote, please indicate whether you are in favor of the consideration and action to approve this consideration and action to approve BerryDunn to manage the reconciling of MainePERS reporting for employees and retirees prior to January 2024.
Member Ali?
Yes.
Member Bilyeu?
Yes.
Vice Chair Bondo?
Yes.
Member BerryDunn?
Yes.
Member Figdor?
Yes.
Member Grant is absent. Member Noor?
Yes.
Member Opperman?
Yes.
Student Representative Hayden?
Yes.
Representative Katiba is absent. Representative Knight is absent. Representative McDonald is absent now. Representative Rosado, absent. Representative Kunku, absent. And Chair Lentz.
Yes, so the motion passes. Thank you all very much for that. And up next, we have consideration and action to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056D to discuss, I have the wrong language in my document here. Hold on one second. I just want to make sure I'm reading the right. So a consideration action to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056E to speak about the Ethics Commission for the Board of Education. So I'd be looking for a motion to enter into executive session. Thank you, Board Member Opperman. A second, Board Member BerryDunn. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Zoom hand. Okay, I see a majority there. Thank you very much. So board members, we're going to sign off of Zoom here and then into the Google Meet link that was shared. We'll need to come back into this Zoom to adjourn the meeting after. I'll see you in the Google Meet. Could I have a motion to adjourn the meeting, please? And Fatuma and Sarah Bryden, could you please be those people? Yes. Thank you. Fatuma is a motion. They're just the only people I can see. Yeah. Sarah Bryden seconded. All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand.
Everybody in the room raise their hand.
Raise their hand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Have a good day.
At 9:25 p.m. Thank you.